Today I'd like to talk about how we built a very nice stone walkway going to our backyard. This here is what the final product is going to look like. In the beginning, we moved into our house. The previous owner had severely neglected the outside, so we set about rejuvenating it. New topsoil, concrete flower beds, raised flower gardens, and brand new grass. Finally, the front yard was exactly the way we wanted it. Now, unfortunately, let's enter into the picture the local garbage company. They told us we have to use these humongous garbage cans for the recycling and the yard waste. Have you ever tried to pull a 200-pound wheeled bin across a wet lawn in the middle of the winter? It's not easy, so it's time to change the lawn. Start digging. We laid out a path the exact width that we'll need for these big old carts. Using string for leveling, we dug down into the earth for a foundation. Wanting the edge of the path to be unique, decided to go with bricks laid up on their sides. This presented a stability challenge for us, but we found a solution. The problem could be solved by pouring a concrete foundation underneath the brickwork. Your foundation needs to be wider than your bricks. Bricks on end are about 2 inches wide, so your foundation will be about 6 inches wide. Keeping this in mind, your formwork will extend about 2 inches either side of where you want your bricks to actually be laid down. Cut rebar and install it in your formwork. Then get your string and your level back out again, and put your leveling string back up. While pouring the concrete, use your string to determine the depth of the concrete. And since we'll be using mortar to hold the bricks in place, I put little hatch marks into the concrete when it was wet to give the mortar something to grab onto. After your foundation has cured, mortar your bricks into place. Anytime you're building something outside, water has to be considered. When I stood back and looked at the progress of my walkway at this point, this is what I saw in my mind's eye. It's called an aqueduct. It's used to move water from one place to another. Unfortunately, this aqueduct would end at my driveway. So anytime it rained, or I watered my lawn, water would flow out of my pathway directly into the driveway. This is not desirable. This problem, too, also had a solution. It's called a dry well. At the low point of the driveway, I dug a real deep hole. Okay, as I stand in the hole, considering it a kind of deep hole. Fill the hole up with rocks. On top of the hole, put a barrier that prevents solids from getting through, but allows water to seep in. Now any water coming down your walkway or aqueduct will go into the hole and be distributed out into the soil. With that problem fixed, back to the pathway. Put down an anti-vegetation barrier. Go to the store and buy this neat looking tool. It's called a tramper. By lifting it up and slamming it into the ground, you can actually compact soil. Or in this case, the 5/8 gravel that we used for our foundation. This is a necessary thing to do because if you don't, you'll have settling later. At this point, I went out and purchased our rock. I spent about 2 days moving the rock around, putting it in different positions to find out the best fit for the minimum number of cuts. My next trip out brought about 7,000 pounds of sand in. Not all of the sand went toward the rockway. I tilled much of it into the front lawn to improve the drainage. But finally, I did top off the pathway with sand all the way to the top of the brick. Followed behind with my trusty tramper to pack the sand in as tight as possible. Then gently raked it out so I had a smooth bed to start placing my rock. To place a rock, gently scoop out enough sand that you can put the rock into place and pound it down with a rubber mallet so that it's exactly level with the brick. Then move on to the next rock. When you run into a rock or stone that won't fit, this is where it comes time to cut it. I used my rip saw. Traditionally you use rip saws for wood, but if you buy this special blade, you'll see that it was designed specifically for cutting stone or masonry. It's a steel blade that has chips of industrial-grade diamonds embedded into the blade. Needless to say, these blades are not cheap, so take very good care of them. I've included a short bit of footage from another project I was working on to give you an idea of how to use a saw when you're cutting brick or stone or concrete. The idea here is to go very slow and make very shallow cuts. You want to let the diamonds do the work for you. And as you can see, all the concrete dust is flying. Make sure you wear a dust mask. You don't want to be breathing that stuff in. Since using the blade wears it out, you want to use it as little as possible, in which case I usually make my cuts about 3/4 of the way through, Then take the chisel and little sledge and go ahead and clean up the bottom half. The top half will be a nice smooth cut. The bottom half, you don't care what it looks like as long as it's cut. Here we have it, a finished walkway. Placement of the stones is kind of important. You don't want to just set them all side by side in columns and rows. You want them to be mixed up. Since you have the capability of cutting the stone, do things like this to add character to your walkway. Looking at the final walkway, it's hard to believe that there's 7 inches of foundation underneath it. But the time that you put into that foundation was absolutely essential to keeping this walkway looking good for a long, long time. If you live in the right climate, you'll eventually get moss growing in between the stones. This will enhance the visual appearance of your walkway and make it much nicer to walk on. Not counting growing the new lawn, it took us about, say 3 months to complete this project. Well, thanks for watching.